Good evening and welcome to Quays TV's very own political series covering the US election in less than 50 days. With 18 days to go, I'm Ben Cook.
And I'm Caitlin Lang. This week we'll be looking at whether existing law enforcement is effective in the US, analysing where presidential candidates Kamala Harris and Donald Trump stand on the peak of lawlessness that has culminated in the United States.
Yes, since the riots began in July, domestic crime and rioting has become a growing concern for our own government. In response to this, we'll also be looking a little closer to home and examining how the public opinion of Greater Manchester Police has changed in recent months and what solutions might we look towards taking inspiration from the presidential campaigns.
At a time when many lack faith within our public services, we'll be speaking to Dr. Taylor Umland to discuss how these looking to put the public interest at heart can try and gauge this transparency through social media.
And with a lack of trust in our public sector, why would anyone want to go into it? Well, I sat down with aspiring politician Mia Barnett this week to discuss that very notion.
But to start this whole week off, Rosa will be explaining to us the epidemic of domestic crime in America and the United Kingdom alike. Over to you, Rosa.
Thanks, Caitlin. So, we're getting very close to the election now, and it's still so close. Despite an early boost in the polls, Kamala seems to be lagging slightly, as you can see here. She is slightly ahead in the national poll, but like I said in the very first week, the popular vote essentially does not matter. It's the Electoral College we need to watch out for. At the moment, Trump is ahead in Georgia, Nevada and North Carolina. Kamala has the slimmest lead in Wisconsin, is tied in Pennsylvania, and is even slightly behind in Michigan, according to some polls. If Trump wins either Michigan, Pennsylvania or Wisconsin, then he wins the election. So as I promised last week, I'll give a quick overview of North Carolina, but before I do, in the spirit of the episode, I'd like to give an overview of law and lawlessness. So, the public perception on how a president deals with law is really vital in terms of their election pitch. People want to feel safe. They want a president who they can trust to protect them. That's why we have a really interesting election here, because on the one side, you have Trump, who's being convicted of felonies, but also has a strong, tough-talking public persona that might make some gravitate towards him for dealing with dangerous people. And on the other hand, we have Kamala, a trained lawyer who is the Attorney General of California, who is a woman. And the public perception of women, as we know, tends towards the strictly misogynistic, that they're weak, easily influenced. And despite their records, both Trump and Kamala have to prove themselves to be the opposite of what they have shown in the past. So what do the public think of them on crime and policing? Here's a poll first that I showed you week 1, I think, and it shows Trump is ahead ever so slightly on crime, perhaps due to what I explained. So here we've got dealing with crime and violence, 41 to 47. So that's only a very slight advantage. However, there's a slightly more recent poll on the other side, showing Kamala has pulled ahead on the issue. So here we've got policing crime, we've got 43 to 40. So again, a tiny, tiny margin. Could she be doing better? This ought to have been an open goal for her, but this issue has not been an open goal for her, which could be concerning for her campaign. So very quickly, what are some of their plans? Now, I don't have time to go through all of them, but I'd just like to point out the areas we're in. So, Kamala came under fire from the left when she originally ran to be the presidential candidate before 2020. There were rumours, eventually proven to have been exaggerated, that her term had unfairly imprisoned a number of men when she was the Attorney General of California, particularly African Americans, for non-violent drug offences. Whatever the truth was, she has been attempting to cleanse this idea in the public record. She has announced she will decriminalise weed and has an interest in reducing overcrowding in prisons, perhaps being more lenient on these non-violent offenders, but we'll have to see. On the other side, Trump is coming down very hard. He has consistently linked lawlessness to alleged illegal immigration. He plans mass deportations and has even suggested at one point the death penalty for drug dealers, although that has not been an official part of his campaign. So only time will tell how both of these affect the vote. We aren't sure now what people's perceptions of those will be, but very soon we will find out. So really quickly, I'd like to reel through some quick things to look out for in North Carolina, because I didn't get the chance to cover that last week. So North Carolina is really important for Trump. It has been leaning his way fairly steadily now for a while, as we can see in this next slide. I've got a poll here, 538 poll. It is Southern, it's conservative, so it seems like a safe bet, except that it has such a small margin. If we look a bit closer here, 48.3 to 47.3, that is just literally 1 percentage point that could be the difference between winning or losing North Carolina for Trump. And there are two things I'll run through that might affect this election either way. The first is the storms. So 2 devastating hurricanes have recently hit America, leaving carnage and missing people in North Carolina. Will the government assistance convince the people of the Biden-Harris administration? Or will more people turn back to the kind of populism that Trump offers? We'll have to see. These areas that have been really badly hit tend to be more rural. They might have voted for Trump initially. Will they turn away now? It's impossible to say so far, but we will see, because voting has now opened, early voting in North Carolina. And finally, we have Mark Robinson. He is the Republican candidate for governor in the region, and due to a very interesting journalistic investigation, he was linked to a right-wing pornography site. The commenter, who was allegedly Robinson, called himself Black Hitler, amongst other things. This has not been popular with the public. Suffice to say, he has denied that it was him and says he still wants to run. But having been so close to Trump before this scandal and openly supported by him at rallies, there is a chance this could affect Trump's polling. The job of the Democrats is to link Robinson to Trump in this region. So we'll have to wait and see. Yet again, I keep saying that, but we don't know how these things are going to play out. I can only suggest things that might have an impact. I'm going to try over the next 2 weeks to cover the rest of the swing states before the election. So I'll see you next week, and back to you, Caitlin and Ben.
Well, that certainly gives us a lot to think about.
Now, we will be looking at an interview I did earlier with Mia Barnett as we discussed age in relation to politics in the US and the UK.
Mia is an aspiring politician for the Conservative Party. Let's have a look now.
Yeah, it is absolutely lovely to have you here today, and we're going to dive straight into the American election, the race for the White House. So approximately 41 million members of Gen Z will be eligible to vote in November, including millions who were too young to vote back in 2020. And although Gen Zs are widely thought to be left-leaning, millions of young adults in the States actually do identify as conservatives. I know it's not the same conservative as what you are here in England, but it's pretty similar. Conservatism is conservatism, isn't it? Whether it's in the form of the Conservative Party in the UK or the Republican Party in America. Given that you're a young Conservative in England, do you think that there is a common misconception that all young people are staunch believers in the left, in left-wing ideologies, both here in the UK and across the pond? And why do you think there isn't that representation for young Conservatives? Because over in America, especially, we're seeing Kamala Harris, and she's so strongly identified with a brat summer, isn't she? And very, very much sort of got that Gen Z following. Why do you think that we think that whether it's here or in America, it's sort of impossible to be young and conservative or young and right wing?
I think it's there is definitely like a huge proportion of people across the globe that are left wing. I think a lot of it comes down to what the parties have traditionally campaigned for. Like for instance, with the Conservative Party in the UK, I mean, even just looking at the last general election, there was consistently campaigning for sort of the housing situation did benefit young people in a sense, but then you also had national service being brought in, which obviously wouldn't appeal to young people. And you've had sort of the Labour Party bringing in all these ideas about sort of getting uni costs down. And then also just like going back traditionally, I think lots of people generally, when you're more older, you tend to have more conservative views. And I think one thing the left is very good at putting out there is the social media campaign. So I think that is something that they do really well. I think when it comes down to the American general election, I'm personally backing Kamala Harris, even though I'm generally a young conservative and right wing. To me, Kamala Harris is quite, because America's generally quite conservative as a whole, she's more centre right, which is personally where I am. Whereas Trump's more that far right and that kind of extreme conservative, which, you know, does appeal to plenty of people there. But I think Kamala Harris is picking up lots of the left leaning people from the country and then lots of the centre right, centre left people as well.
And Mia, considering that you are 17, quite a young age to be in the political sphere, as part of US Constitution, presidential candidates are required to be at least 35 years old to run for office. At this age, they seem to be more mature and wiser, have more political and professional experience. And in the late 18th century, when this was decided, life expectancy was a lot shorter than today. Reaching the age of 35 was already considered an achievement in terms of adulthood and responsibility. However, do you, obviously with yourself being so involved in the political sphere in England at your age, do you think that a restriction such as this is fair? That, you know, there's an argument that prohibiting anyone under the age of 35 to run for office, America could not only be missing out on youthful energy, but also young people today have better access to education and global awareness. Not to mention that several countries have already had leaders in their 30s who've been proven more than capable. Finland had Sanna Marin and Austria's had Sebastian Kurz, both of whom were prime ministers in their early 30s. So do you think this amendment needs looking at?
Definitely. I think it's definitely good to have like a minimum age limit. I think it's especially important that when you're getting people that have a role as big as President of America, that you're getting someone that's experienced in a whole wide range of issues. And they've got to be someone that, you know, has spent time throughout the country working on different policies, whether it's trade, education, whether it's working in Congress or as a teacher outside. I definitely think it's important to have that experience. With regards to it being 35, I personally would be in favour of bringing that slightly lower. I don't see, I understand why that was brought around at the time. I don't see why 35 is necessarily, whether you're going to be any different at 35 now than you would be at 34 currently. So I think having that specific cap there maybe is quite off-putting to young people that want to get into politics. But I also think that, you know, it kind of suggests also that you have to be almost too old to run for to be presidency. You know, we've seen with Biden and with Trump recently
Well,
that
Mia,
we're
yes, that
yeah,
brings me perfectly on to what I was about to say. On the flip side, do you think there should be an age limit for candidates running for office? Because Biden was the oldest person inaugurated at 78, and throughout his presidency, we've watched many episodes of incoherence at time. If elected, Donald Trump will be 78 on inauguration day, and Kamala Harris will only be 60. So do you think this is an advantage for her?
I definitely think it's an advantage for Kamala Harris. I mean, she's picking up enough of the younger vote anyways, but I do think that lots of people see her as that more capable and strong leader because of her age in comparison to Trump. However, I don't see as strong a difference between the age of her and Trump and the age difference between Trump and Biden when they were campaigning. I think a lot of it does depend on your own personal health, your own personal mindset and mentality. I think I wouldn't put a cap on the age, on the top age for running for presidency, because I think you can get someone that's absolutely capable at 90 and someone that is completely incoherent at 40. But I think we should place a lot more responsibility on the Democratic Party and the Republican Party and all independent candidates to make sure that they're picking a candidate that is capable for the job, regardless of their age. And I feel like putting a set restriction wouldn't necessarily ensure that you're going to get the best views heard.
Yeah. And Mia, just shifting it on a little bit, over the last few years, there's been concerns raised in the media and by the American people that the country has become somewhat lawless. There's been several instances of police brutality and racial injustice, historically in the case of among many others, but Emmett Till and more recently George Floyd. And in terms of civil unrest, events like the storming of the US Capitol, which we seen on January the 6th, 2021, these sorts of events are viewed as severe breakdowns of law and order. Do you think the situation across the pond over in America in terms of law and order is out of control? And what sort of steps do you think could be taken to remedy this sort of discourse?
Yeah, so I think there's a huge problem with police brutality in America. I think there is Black people are hugely and disproportionately affected by this. They're 3 times more likely to be killed than white people, and yet they're 1.3 times less likely to be armed. So I think it's clear that there's a huge proportion of Black people that, are being attacked by the police that really shouldn't be. And I think there's plenty of African American police members who have also committed these acts of brutality. It isn't just white policemen that are, but I think a lot of it is down to wanting to, be accepted in their departments for tackling crime in a strong way. I think possibly, definitely getting more Black people into the police force would be a huge step on cracking down, but also making sure that we have a sensible leader like Kamala Harris at the top, who is, telling people, not swaying them into violence, as we've seen with Trump and the January 6th Capitol attacks. Although after he changed his position, he did originally incite violence on the Capitol. And he's even said now that he would waive plenty of the charges. So you've got someone that is right at the top that lots of people look up to, that is almost promoting this lawlessness in America. So I think it's hugely vital that, these key figures that everyone or lots of people look up to, that they have a clear message that violence across America and across the globe is not okay.
And Mia, there's argument to both sides. We've seen a bit of this in the vice presidential debate with Vance and Waltz. Sort of the Democrats are very fearful that if another Trump term was to happen, we could see a threat to democracy in terms of January the 6th and the Capitol, what he's been seen to have done then. He refused to sort of accept when he lost to Biden that he had actually lost. And the Republicans have rebuffed that, saying that the Democrats, with their mass censorship and really cracking down on what people say on social media, that could be sort of taken in as a freedom of speech loss. Who do you think would be a bigger threat to democracy in America?
So personally, I think if Trump was to lose the election, I think that could have some serious consequences in America. We've seen it when he lost the 2020 election, and I do worry for the whole of America, the uprising that could cause. I'm personally all for freedom of speech. I think people should be able to speak how they want on issues. I don't think cracking down on social media posts is going to change people's overarching opinions on the election. But I do think both candidates need to be careful not to incite violence, and make sure that they're promoting to their candidates sensible politics. Because I think when politics gets hostile is when it quite often scares young people away. And as a young person myself that's, wanting to pursue a career in politics, I see young people all around me that are put off by the hostile rhetoric from both candidates at times. And that's not fair on any young person wanting to get into politics.
Fabulous. And Mia, just before we let you go, we are getting closer and closer to that all-important day where we'll find out who the next president of the United States of America will be. The polls are looking extremely close. We're not going to see any sort of landslide here. It literally is neck and neck at this point. What are your predictions? What can you see happening?
So I definitely think it's going to be hugely close. Obviously, myself, I'm hoping that Kamala Harris will be elected, but I definitely think it's going to be really tricky in those swing states. It's going to be hugely close. I think ethnic minorities, a huge proportion which don't traditionally vote, is going to be down to who they would like to vote for that's going to sway this. And then also young people as well, because there's huge proportions of young people that still don't vote in elections. But hopefully with the, more social media campaigning, that will entice young people, entice young people into voting, which could, change the results in the swing states.
Mia, it was a great insight into age in the political sphere, both here and across the pond, and letting us know your thoughts of a possible lawless America. Thank you very much for joining us. It was great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now joining us in the studio is a very recent addition to the University of Salford team, Dr. Taylor Umland.
So Taylor, this week we are analysing how existing law enforcement in the UK is effective in growing lawlessness in America and the UK. Do you think social media has added to this rise in riots, and how so?
I think it's impossible to say it hasn't contributed it to in some way. I mean, the thing about social media is it allows us to go off and talk about things that we don't normally talk about with other people in open conversation because we're not sure if they'd be into it, right? But
Sure.
Social media offers us that inroad where we can find people who think like us, right? You can listen to, there's loads of different examples and different reporting that's been done, but people who started off in a local protest and then found out there was people from somewhere else who were involved in that issue, and it sort of spirals and spirals, and then you get into, how it affects their political thinking, and then what it actually motivates people to take action. Social media has a huge impact.
And Taylor, in your PhD, you did take a large look at sort of the necessity to cooperate with each other to build trust, and you were specifically looking at it in relation to Twitter on social media. Just sort of separating the whole, what you found out on building trust with one another. A lot of lawlessness that is happening in the States, or alleged lawlessness that we've been seeing, the riots on the US Capitol, there's been countless cases. How do you think the authorities, public services, the police, how do you think they can build up trust with sort of the American people? And also, there was riots here in Manchester, so it does go across the board, across both sides of the pond.
I think people have really stopped trusting institutions, and it's not just me that thinks that. There's been quite a bit of research that trust in brands is lower, trust in individuals is up, and I think that's a lot has to do with social media. Going back to your question, is that we used to have it so if the Manchester Evening News said it was the newspaper's brand that was on the line, not maybe the small journalistic byline there, but that power has totally shifted with social media. Now it's the individual reporters who are building the trust, saying, trust me. I may work for this brand, but trust me, right? And I think that makes a huge difference in how you build trust with people. And when you talk about something as big as the US government trying to build trust with people, I think that's almost impossible now, because it's so low in terms of what the government output has been. A lot of people distrust it. There's so much segmentation where people are 50% this, 50% that. There's so much tear that it's really.
Do you think the political polarization does have a lot to do with what we're seeing?
Massively so, massively so. And it's really hard to try to convince people who think you're rotten to the core that you're worth trust, right? So I think that's where it comes from the individuals. That's why you see people who become leaders in, let's just say militia groups or something like that, or even something like a party leader in politics. They get trust in themselves, right? It's less about the organization. Don't trust me because I'm a Tory. Don't trust me because I'm a Republican or a Democrat or whatever. Trust me because of what I can do for you. So I think just brand trust is very far down. It's a very hard thing to achieve.
And do you see those sort of parallels between the US and the UK, as someone that is American, presumably? Do you see those sorts of parallels between the US and the UK, or is one worse than the other, in your opinion?
I moved here for a reason, so I think I will always say that the US is a very far-ended extreme of what capitalism can do, how it it really comes down to the bottom dollar, what is best for. That's how America is generally run. Like, you look at the fact that Americans don't get any paid holiday by federal law, they zero, and things like that. So capitalism has really run amok in America, sort of dictating public policy, where I think Britain has had a lot more of a social standing, more workers' rights, things like that. So I do think that America is a far-ended version of what we get from that brand of democracy and capitalism, and just sort of the rip in society. Could go off on a tangent about the whole Second Amendment, but I won't. But yeah, I do think that there is a lot of parallels there, and I do think a lot of the issues are the same, but there's so much more rhetoric that goes on to America and things that typed up in the Bill of Rights.
And Taylor, as you touched on before, we lived in sort of a landscape for years and years and years where we sort of did take our news from the newspaper or from a news channel, and we trusted that. Now we live in an age of complete fast-flowing information coming at us from all different angles, and we do tend to take a lot from social media. How effective do you think the media can still be in this day and age with this sort of uptake of social media, citizen journalism, anyone can be a journalism, the lack of fact-checking? Do you think there's a power imbalance now between the media and social media? How do you think we've got to that? How do you think we can change that? How do you think this is going to look for us going forward?
That's a really good question.
Sorry, it was a
long-winded question.
It was a long question, but I do think the kind of the bit that you're picking out there is how can we improve upon this terrible sort of situation where trust in journalism is low. It's never been super high, but it's not great. And trust in brands is lower. So how do you improve that? And it is through things like what I wrote about in my PhD, like transparency. Telling people not just what you're doing, but why, and trying to do that as close to real time as you feasibly can. Now, you can make a lot of statements about public policy. Maybe it shouldn't be as transparent in government because government doesn't move at the same speed as social media does. Like, there are still the gears of government that things have to go through. We can't be completely transparent to say, well, this is what we're doing today, when we might not see the effect of it for 6 months or what have you. But I think that nugget there about transparency is how you build trust. When I was doing my PhD, it was all about trust and why anybody trusts one another. And it's quite simple. If you do something that I expect you to do, that builds trust. It's just little building blocks of that. So if I have an expectation of a politician and you start coming through on those things, or of a journalist to provide certain types of transparency or coverage, and you keep doing that, I will continue to trust you little bits over time. There isn't a you can trust me now button, but it
has to be earned and built up over time, which hopefully the next presidents of the United States, either Trump or Harris, will do their best to show us that we can trust them, or the American people, moreover.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Final question. Speaking of trust within positions of authority, maybe could you touch upon the systematic failings or the alleged systematic failings within the police in the US and how that might contribute in an election?
I think it's an interesting thing when you go into the police, because the police have a really long history, especially when you go through the civil rights movement in America and the powers police were given and what things they were allowed to do to people, whoever it was. Police were given powers to really do things to people without much repercussion, because the society viewed what they were doing as right. And so you kind of got this historical idea that the police were able to take pretty severe consequences or severe action and it would be okay. And then I think it's very hard for the police as a wider thing. I think that's why defund the police became such a movement there for a little while, because there is this low trust in the police, and there's low trust in people with power. I think just across the board sweeping statement, there is a lack of trust in people for power, whether that is politics, whether that is police, journalistically, broadcasters. There's this low trust in people that say that it has to go through us. Law and order, politics, information has to go through us. People don't respond very well to that.
And if that is the case, Taylor, I think that we will be entering very dangerous territory, and we need to be making steps to build that trust up across all areas. But Taylor, it was amazing having you in
Thank
the
you
studio
very
with us
much.
today. You give us huge insight into trust, how we can build trust in social media specifically, and know is what you have you've spent a lot of time looking into. So thank you very much, Taylor.
Thank you. Now, we've considered how the GMP might convey a certain transparency online, but have their efforts to create trust ultimately been effective?
Well, Claudia and Max went out and spoke to the locals to find out.
In April, The Guardian revealed that on average only 4 out of 10 people trust in the police. This trust rating further plummeted when Chief Inspector of the Constabulary Andy Cook described the police as hanging on by a thread. With reports of far-right rioting across the country in July, do people trust their local police force? Let's find out. How do you feel about the police?
I feel quite good.
They got a job to do. Yeah, they do a job. They've got an hard job, haven't they?
What do you think about the police?
I think they're usually pretty good most of the time, pretty helpful, I guess.
Yeah, the police here is very cooperative, and the beautiful thing about the police is the law enforcement. I love this.
Talking about the police here in UK, because I'm an international student here, so I feel a lot much like think that this police department is cooperating with us a lot. So I think so the police working here is really good. So I am just really very satisfied about them, that they are enforcing law over there. So the police is working good here.
Do you think the police are effective in keeping the community safe?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Do you think the police are effective in keeping the community safe?
Well, they're trying out, but the budgets from the government are not doing too good, but that's all made to happen for the evil geniuses in charge.
I would say so, yeah. I would think so. Anyway, I have no rivalry with them where I live, so they're always there, so yeah.
Since I've been here, which is like a month now, I've not seen anything bad really, I guess. I don't know, I live next to them. I live in John Lester, so I can hear them, the sirens blazing every 5 minutes, so they're doing something, clearly.
Do you think the police is good at keeping the community safe?
Yes, definitely. It's 100% police is keeping the community all the safe. Even regarding the minor things, they keep everything under their eye, and it's very good to be here under the surveillance. It's like, yes, it's good, and 5 stars to them.
So I think so it's a human nature, like you have to be someone over you to control you. So I think so police is playing a major role over there, because of somehow we have some kind of fear over there, because if we can do this, the police is over there, someone is supervising us, if someone is seeing us, someone will stop us, and like, so I think so the police should be there, and police is working there a bit really good to save the community.
Do you think that police brutality exists here?
That's a difficult question to answer. I think it's quite a controversial thing going on. But in my opinion, sometimes maybe that brutality is a necessity for the community to be aware that we've got the police to be taken care of. And I think maybe there has been some situations, but I'm not totally against it, if you understand what I mean. I think sometimes it's a necessity for the police to show their power, that what we need in the society.
So I think people add that on a little bit, but I think in some cases maybe more than others. And yeah.
Police brutality exists here.
I think there's a bit sometimes, isn't there? Yeah. I think they do go over the top a bit, but I don't know. They are under a lot of pressure, so yeah.
Think police brutality exists here?
Yes.
Can you tell us more about that?
I know a few friends that have been beat up. I can't say names, but they have been beat up by the police, but they're the ones that you don't want. You have got good and you've got bad.
Yeah.
The good ones are really good, but the bad ones, believe me, honestly, I've been there myself when I was younger. I put in school in the 80s. But you get good, like I say, they're great today.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're great.
Do you think police brutality exists in this country?
Yes, to an extent. Not as bad as it is in America, I don't think. Either that or it doesn't get televised as much. But yeah, I think it's definitely a problem.
Do you think that police brutality exists here?
No, not even 1%. Not even 0.1%. The police is very cooperating and friendly here.
So I don't have really much attraction with them, but I don't think so that they are, because I have seen them in very places over there, like they are I think they should not. They are not. They are,
Do you know much about police brutality in the United States?
No, not that.
No, I'm sorry, I don't know.
Do you know much about police brutality in the United States?
I don't know, no.
And what do you know about police brutality in the United States?
I think they're a bit like full on, but like you say, it's a different country and it don't bother us here.
So very typical ones that you see, Black Lives Matter was the most famous one that I'm aware of. So I think that's the one that's the most famous one in the United States that's been going on for decades. Yeah, that's totally what I know.
Do you know about police brutality in the US?
Just what I see on TV and stuff. Often against minority groups, usually just unfair punishment without any real legal cause, I guess.
Do you know much about police brutality in the United States?
Just about George Floyd, which was disgusting, absolutely disgusting the way that what happened. I don't agree with any riots. I think protests, yeah, but no riots, because riots cause more, spreads around the world. Well, it does spread around the world, the riots, but what they do to black people is disgusting, and I mean that.
That they recruit more reliable people, because the situation that came to my head was Sarah Evergreen, which I was scared because if the police took me aside and told me that I was arrested, I would have gone, I was like, no questioning nothing. So I think if we've got some citizens that will accept whatever the police say, maybe we need to have more background checks and making sure that the people that are recruited as the police are reliable people.
Just more of the same, really. More of the same. Maybe a bit more funding, maybe, or whatever, or anything like that.
What changes would you like to see in policing?
I think there should be multicultural, different races in the police force, where you don't see a lot of it because a lot of them get, what's the word, racism.
Yeah.
There's a lot of racism with white police. I mean, I've got a lot of black in my family, and I'd love to see a lot more black police officers, because
in policing.
More police walking around.
Great.
so the human beings,
Yeah.
they bleed the same blood, so why not?
Thank you so much. What changes, if any, would you like to be seen made in policing?
Just more police walking about, being seen, and in general, that's it, yeah. That's it.
What changes would you like to see being made to policing?
Probably more strict, if they are to they should have a real reason to attack anyone. Obviously in America they have guns, they should have a real reason to pull them out. Over here, just not jump on people, kind of have proper serious cause before they hurt anyone.
Amazing, thank you so much.
Well, I guess that leaves us with a lot to think about.
Yes, I believe it does. Join us next week when we'll be looking at Trump and Harris's responses to a growing concern against southern immigration for the next president. I'm Caitlin Lang.
And I am Ben Cook. Thank you and good night.